Hello, Cog Hill Cougars. Today is Monday, April 27th, and we have a CKLA lesson, Gran's Trip Home. We have read all kinds of interesting things that Gran, Josh, and Jen have done. And your activity, your task last Friday was Gran's mud race. That was really interesting for a grandmother to do. And so now Gran is going home. The objective is I can recognize features of a sentence, such as a capital letter at the beginning of the sentence and some kind of punctuation at the end, especially a period, a question mark, or an exclamation mark to show excitement. I can read and understand stories, giving details and understanding questions. I can write sentences with adjectives, nouns, and verbs. The question is, can you add a verb to a phrase to complete a sentence? And the phrases are going to have nouns and adjectives, and so you're going to have to add a verb so that the sentence is a complete sentence. Right now, we're going to review some changes because when we're looking at a word and we don't know the word, but we know a word that looks a lot like it, if we change a letter, sometimes we will know the word. So let's look at fume. If we change the M to an S, it becomes fuse. If we take off the F, it becomes use. If we add an M, it becomes muse. And if we change the S to an L, it becomes mu. Let's look at cute. If we change the T to a B, cute becomes cube. If we take off that E, cube becomes cub. And if we change the B to a T, cub becomes cut. Let's look at weed. And remember the EE goes together as one. So if we change the W to an N, it becomes need. If we take off that EE and change it to an O, the word becomes nod. If we change the N to an R, the word becomes rod. And if we add an E, that E is going to make the O say O, so it becomes road. Okay. So let's look at some of these phrases. And we're going to try to write this sentence at the top. So I'm going to erase our objectives because we know what they are. Our first sentence says, the silly boy. And we know by now our noun is boy, and the adjective is silly. And since it's not a sentence, we don't have a capital T. But if we are going to make it a sentence, then we have to say number one, the capital T, silly boy. And let's think of some things that we can say. Since he's silly, silly boys like to do tricks sometimes. So let's say the silly boy does tricks. So our verb becomes does. So boy is our noun. Silly is our adjective that describes the boy. And does tricks is the noun. The verb. Number two, a scary story. So again, capital A, C-A-R-Y, a scary story. And let's think, what can we say about a scary story? If you like scary stories, it could be fun. So let's write that. A scary story is fun to do what? To read. And there's our period. Okay, so let's read. A scary story is fun to read because sometimes it's fun to be afraid. Even when we're reading it with someone else, that makes it even more fun. Number 3, a large park. A large park. What would a large park have in it? A large park has lots, and all of these are words that we can spell and write down. A large park has lots of play. Now we could say equipment, but that's a real hard word to write. So let's say things. A large park has lots of playthings, meaning a slide and a swing and a merry-go-round and maybe a sandbox. And think of some other things that a park could have on it. So far we have a large park has lots of playthings. Number 4, the nice teacher. So here is that capital T, the nice teacher. And what would a nice teacher do? Maybe reads what? A story. So are these sentences complete sentences? Can you understand them? Do they make sense? The nice teacher reads a story, and teacher is the noun, nice is the adjective, and reads would be the action word. So now I'm going to erase this first row to make room for number 5. A good movie. Let's change it and let's say we looked at. So now where are we putting a good movie? At the end of the sentence. So now we is our noun. It's actually a pronoun. And looked is our verb. We looked at a good movie. But guess what? Movie is still a noun. And good is still the adjective that describes the movie. And the last one is the red car. Number 6, I think I said 5. Number 6, the red car. Remember, we have to think of words that we can write, or we can look on our word wall if we were in class. So how about the red car goes fast? Okay, so now we're going to go back and we're going to underline our noun. We're going to circle our adjective. The silly boy does tricks. Our noun is boy. Are you doing that at home? And silly is our adjective. And let's put a box over does. A scary story is fun to read. So story and scary is silly. I think we're just gonna do adjectives and nouns right now because we're just starting verbs. A large park has lots of playthings. So park is our noun and large is our adjective. Has would be our verb. The nice teacher reads a story. So teacher is the noun. Nice is the adjective, and reads would be the verb. We looked at a good movie. Now this is a change because we would be our noun, the pronoun, and looked would be the verb, and way over here good would be our adjective, but it's actually describing the movie. The red car goes fast, so the car is the noun. Red is our adjective, and goes is our verb. So kids, what I want you to do, and I know most of you all are not doing this, is I want you to read along with what I'm doing and write. I want you to have your tablet, and I want you to write with me. If you can't do that, then you need to stop the tape so that you can read it with me and then write it so that you have work to do. And then kids, all you have to do is take a picture of it and send it to me, and you can have a grade on it. So our story today is Gran's trip home. Before we do that, we want to read our questions. So our questions for the story, so that while we're reading, remember this is part of our unravel. We want to know the questions ahead of time so that when we are reading our story, we're going to hear those answers as we're reading. So the first question that we're going to think about while we're reading is, what did Gran say Tex was going to do? At the beginning of the story, she said Tex was going to do something with Josh and Jen. Number 2 said, why did Gran have a map? So pay close attention to Gran when she talks about having a map. And then she said she's going to, and when she goes home, she's going to do different things. These are verbs. She's going to ride, she's going to cross, and she's going to hike. So we're going to look in the story to see what is she going to ride, what is she going to cross, and where she's going to hike. Number 4 says, how many miles from Pine Hill does Gran have to go to get to her house? And number 5, what did Tex say about Gran? He said something nice about Gran to the grandkids. So let's look out for that. And that should be at the end of the story because that was our last question. Okay, this is our story. And it's called Gran's Trip Home. Gran hugs Josh and Jen. Tex will take you kids back in his truck. She says, remember this sentence, Tex will take you kids back in his truck. She says, will you take a bus? Jen asks. Nope, says Gran. Gran waves a map. This will get me home, she says. Let's read that again. Gran waves a map. This will get me home, she says. Can we hear those answers to those questions? And here is Gran, and she's holding the map. See here, she says, we are here. So she points to where they are on the map. And she says, I will ride my bike to 3 Mile Gulch. So since 3 Mile Gulch is all capital letters, it's the name of a place. And a gulch is sort of like a stream or some place where she has to cross. So it's called 3 Mile Gulch, and probably the gulch is 3 miles long, which is here on my map. It will take me a week to get there. So she's going to ride her bike to 3 Mile Gulch, and it's going to take her a week to get to 3 Mile Gulch. So she's going to be riding her bike for quite a while. A whole week, says Josh. And Gran nods, and nods means yes. I will use my rope to cross the gulch. So she's going to swing on her rope. Gran says, then I will hike to Pine Hill. And hike means she's going to walk. She's going to take her backpack and she's going to walk. It's just 9 miles. 9 miles, says Josh. Now, Josh probably doesn't do much walking, so that's a lot for him. But since Gran has done so much, 9 miles and riding her bike, as long as she has to ride it, is not very hard for her because she must be used to doing these things. So look at her taking the rope to go over the gulch. And that sounds funny to say gulch. And she's showing the kids on the map. So they're going back home, and she is going home too. They're going in a truck, but Gran is going all kinds of ways. She could have just taken a plane home, but I guess that wouldn't be too much fun for Gran. Then I will be close to home, says Gran. It is just 10 miles from Pine Hill to my home. 10 miles, said Jen. You kids have got one heck of a Gran, says Tex. Did you hear what Tex says? You kids have got one heck of a Gran, says Tex. As Gran sets off, the kids wave. Gran waves back. See you in 6 weeks, she yells. And there she goes off on her bike. So if we can remember those questions. The first question says, what did Gran say Tex was going to do? And if we go to the beginning of the story, because it is the first question, we're going to read that Tex will take you kids back in his truck. So what did Gran say Tex will do? Gran said Tex will take you kids back in his truck. You don't have to say she says because you're saying it up front. Number 2 says, why did Gran have a map? Well, further down she says, and that's why we have to always go back to our story and find the answer. I think I passed it up. Gran waves a map. This will get me home. So why did Gran have a map? Gran had a map to get her home. We always want to answer in sentences. So then we talked about 3 things that she was going to do: ride, cross, and hike. So let's see what she says first. I bet we know ride. She said she was going to ride her bike to 3 Mile Gulch. And then she said she was going to use the rope to cross the gulch. So we said ride her bike, cross the gulch, and then hike. Let's find hike. And then she says, I think I skipped it again. Then I will hike up to Pine Hill. So she's going to ride, she's going to cross the gulch, and she's going to hike to Pine Hill. And then that's only going to be 9 miles from her home. How many miles from Pine Hill? What did she say? Just 9 miles. And what did Tex say about Gran? I think we can remember that. He said, you kids have got one heck of a Gran. Tex said, you kids have got one heck of a Gran. And when you write that part that he says, remember that you want to put those talking marks. So I need to erase the board once again. Our next activity, when we looked in our story, the last 2 stories, we wrote the letters that the letter teams, let me use blue, and we did EE, and then we did A blank E, and we did I blank E, we did O blank E, let me bring it down some, and we did U blank E. And the words that we looked at so far was keep, teeth, and greet. That was our EE words. And then for A, we had lots of them. We did lake. We did made. And we did take. Remember, I asked you to keep up with these so that you can remember what they are. For we did time for I blank E. We did smile. And we did like. We did not have any for O blank E. And for U blank E, we only had new. So we're going to see if we could add one or two more. Well, we started in the story, and we decided that the A blank E had more words than any. So if we go back in our story, we see take again. We see wave for A blank E, so we could put wave. And we see nope. So that would be an O blank E, N-O-P-E, and that's just another way of saying no. And then home is another O blank E, H-O-M-E. Okay, if we look at the next page. Okay, we see bike. I think that's a good word to use. And we see week, W-E-E-K. So let's see if we can find any more O blank E or U blank E words, because we have enough of everything. Look at use, U-S-E. And here is rope, R-O-P-E. And I don't think we have any more, but we could check. Oh yes, look at close, C-L-O-S-E. So we ended up with quite a few O blank E words. And that's the end. So let's review our words. For E, say E, repeat after me. Keep, teeth, greet, week. For A blank E, lake, made, take, wave. For I blank E, time, smile, like, bike. For O blank E, nope, home, rope, clothes. And for U blank E, we only had two, mu and use. Okay, so you have one sheet this afternoon to do for Gran's trip home. Number 1 says, who will take Josh and Jen back? And you want to write your answer in a complete sentence, remember, in capital letters and the punctuation at the end. And number 2 says, what will Gran use to get to 3 Mile Gulch? And you will write a complete sentence with that also. But I really hope that you wrote this and that you wrote the other things also. Not the questions, because that's too much, but you could have done the sentences that we used, the verbs that we added to the noun and the adjective. So now, as we always do, we have a story, and I love Froggy. And since we're talking about grandma, can you guess what our story is gonna be? Froggy Goes to Grandma. And remember, it is by Jonathan London, and it is illustrated by Frank Mekiewicz. So here is Froggy Goes to Grandma.
Froggy Goes to Grandma's by Jonathan London. Froggy woke up and bounced on his bed. Boing, boing, boing. Yippee, he sang. We're going to Grandma's. And he jumped off. Whee! And he got dressed. Zip, zoop, zup, zut, 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 zat. Froggy, called his mother. What? It's time to pack for our trip, dear. I already did, he said. Then he flopped into the kitchen, flop, 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 and ate his breakfast of cereal and flies. Munch, crunch, munch. Then off to the taxi they went, flop, flop, flop. First, they took a plane. Zoom. Then they went by taxi again. Beep, beep. I can't wait to see Grandma cook, cried Froggy. He called her Grandma Cook because she was the best cook in the world. When they finally got to Grandma's, he cried, Grandma, Grandma, Grandma Cook! And he leapfrogged over Dad. He leapfrogged over Mom. He leapfrogged over Polly Wagalina and almost knocked Grandma down. Whoa, cried Grandma Cook. You're too big to catch, Muffin, but you're just the right size for a great big hug. On their first day at Grandma's, they went to the museum. Now remember, Muffin, no yelling and bouncing around, said Grandma. Look, yelled Froggy, bouncing over to a painting. The famous Frogalisa by Leonardo da Piggy. Froggy, called Grandma. What? Don't touch it. But he was already racing to a statue of an alligator named the Thinker. Look, yelled Froggy. And he sat with his chin on his fist and said, I'm thinking. I think you stink, said Polly, giggling. We don't say stink, said Grandma. We say smell. P.U., said Polly, holding her nose. The next day, they went to a baseball game. Yippee, cried Froggy. Just then, the batter hit a pop-up whack, and the ball sailed up, up, up. It's mine, cried Froggy. And he leapfrogged over Grandma. He leapfrogged over the dugout. He leapfrogged over the catcher, and he caught it in his baseball cap. Got it, cried Froggy. Then he put his cap back on with the ball still in it. Boink! And knocked himself down. Out! Cried the ump. Oops, said Froggy. The next night, they went to an amusement park. Grandma didn't like high places, but Froggy said, Come on, Grandma, it's as easy as falling off a log. And they went on a water slide called the Logger's Revenge. But when they got to the top, Grandma threw her hands and yelled, Whee! And Froggy yelled, Yikes! Looking greener than normal. And on the day after that, Grandma took them bowling, her favorite sport. First up, Grandma bowled the ball. Strike! Next up, Polly pushed the ball, and it rolled slowly, slowly, and came to a stop against the front pin. Strike! Yelled Polly. Now it was Froggy's turn. Watch this! Cried Froggy. And he threw the ball with all his might, but his fingers got stuck. And he flew with the ball. Yikes! Thump! Oops! Cried Froggy. Good try, said Grandma. But the best day of all was the last day. Grandma Cook was going to cook. I want to help, cried Froggy. Then Froggy stood on a chair and helped her stir the sauce, and he sang, Swirly, girly, swiggly, splash. Now it's time to boil the spaghetti, said Grandma. I'll open it, said Froggy. And he was so excited, he tore open the box. Rip! Spaghetti flew everywhere and rained down on Polly's head. Wah! Wailed Polly. Oops, cried Froggy, looking more red in the face than green. But soon Grandma Cook served her famous pasta fraganese, otherwise known as spaghetti with fly sauce. And Froggy and Polly chowed down. Yum, cried Froggy. You're the best grandma ever. Slurp, slurp, slurp. The end.
Wasn't that a cute story, kids? Okay, this is the end of our lesson, and I will see
Hey
you
guys, I'm
tomorrow.
gonna read this book for you today.